Welcome back to Pace Immigration, paceimmigration.com, joined by immigration lawyer Michael O'Rourke. Michael, how's it going?
Great, Sean. How's it going with you?
Very well. I was dipping into the mailbag, the YouTube mailbag. We get tons of questions on our YouTube channel. If you haven't visited our YouTube channel, make sure you go over there, ask any question you want, and I'll pepper them at Michael, and he will answer the questions. And we get a ton of questions on the Jay Treaty. Now, people can go and find our other video on the Jay Treaty for a deep dive of the history, but I thought it would be fun, and because I just like these pictures, I would put these up. The Jay Treaty, 1794, negotiated between U.S. Supreme Court Justice John Jay and King George III. 1795, ratified by the U.S. Senate, and in 1796 it came into effect. Michael, briefly there, that point about sought to ease tensions. What was going on?
Yeah, so after the founding of the United States, there were tensions between British North America territory, which ultimately became Canada, and the new U.S. government, and especially the rights of Indigenous folks to move back and forth across this newly created border was creating tension between the Crown and the U.S.
Right. And we fast forward a little bit, and we've got here exactly what you're talking about with Article 3, guarantees the rights of Indigenous individuals to maintain traditional migration and trade routes. There's a quote there. But it didn't last very long in terms of peace, because then we had the War of 1812. Finally, the Treaty of Ghent, ratified by Congress in 1815. And this basically reaffirmed Indigenous rights. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly, on the U.S. side of the border.
Right, and that's key, and we'll touch on that maybe in a little bit, but that was surprising to me when I first got into this stuff with you, that you told me, no, it's a one-way street, basically, the Jay Treaty.
Exactly. For a long, complicated explanation, check out our other video. But in general, the Canadian Supreme Court and various Canadian governments have stated that when the treaty was brought to the legislature of Upper Canada, that there wasn't a quorum, and so it was never legally adopted into Canadian law.
Right. So for our purposes, basically the way we look at it is, if you're an Indigenous person coming north, you're basically treated like every other U.S. citizen.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to get into the questions, because on our video we had a ton of questions come in. We answer those as time goes by, but it's also fun to collect them together and answer them in one big batch. Maybe people will find what they're looking for there. I just threw up here again that it was reaffirmed rather. So we have here: the United States provides Indigenous individuals born in Canada the following rights. And basically what we're talking about is going back and forth and being able to work in the United States, correct?
Exactly, and to become a permanent resident, which some people do want that ultimately.
Right, and the vernacular for that is the green card.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's get into question number one right here. I had this question. I'm wondering what the process of immigration permanent residency is for a non-Aboriginal spouse of the status card holder. Is there a visa that would allow them to cross the border on the same day?
Okay, so we've got two concepts here. We've got the temporary, which is visa and being able to come into the U.S. on a temporary basis. And then we've got the idea of permanent residency, which is a whole different bucket of fish. I don't know. I'm trying to think of the right.
I think it's kettle of fish.
Kettle of fish. Yeah,
I've never actually seen a kettle of fish, but I think that's what it is.
I think it's just a bucket, Sean.
Okay.
Anyway, so temporarily, a spouse can accompany a status card holder who is applying to either come into the U.S. temporarily or permanently at the border crossing. They would probably be given B2 visa, and as a Canadian citizen, it's just an entry, because Canadians aren't technically required to have a B1 or a B2 visa, but they would be noted as an accompanying spouse. They would generally be given 6 months of time to come into the U.S. temporarily and then have to return to Canada. There may be ways of extending that time period while the status card holder is actually getting the permanent residence in order. But when we move from temporary to permanent, the status card holder can only apply for permanent residence for their spouse once their U.S. permanent residence is affirmed and once they've gotten the green card.
All right. And I will point out there is a typo on this. I don't usually like to blame the viewers, but I will this time because I just did a copy and paste. That's why I was a little lazy on that one. Anyway, that's a whole different kettle of fish. The next question. I have a status treaty card from the First Nation of Canada, and I was born in Seattle. Currently reside in San Francisco. I would like to know, would my Canadian status treaty card qualify me to travel to countries in the Caribbean or Central and South America?
No.
Right. I mean, the treaty, as the one that we're talking about, is purely about Canada and the United States. Is that right?
Exactly. And it is baked into U.S. law that you can use your Indian status card to come into the United States if you're an enrolled member of a band in Canada. But that only has the effect at the U.S. border. If you're going to travel anywhere else, you're going to need a Canadian passport.
Okay. What about U.S. Virgin Islands? What like, I know the word U.S. is in there, so I don't know if maybe that's where the Caribbean question came from.
Yeah, technically you can travel to mainland U.S. and U.S. territories. You might have some difficulties convincing the airline that you can do that, but if it's a domestic flight, then technically it should work.
Okay. All right.
Your mileage may vary.
Right. Next one here. Love the content. Thank you very much. Love the content. If I have a treaty card, do I still need a letter from my band saying I have a 50%, I guess that's the blood quantum, or does the card cover that?
Blood quantum is everything in U.S. law, unfortunately. So I would say yes, get the letter from your band, get a genealogy from Indigenous Services Canada or your nation, say if you're Inuit or Metis Nation, then get that genealogy too, because a status card only proves identity. It doesn't prove that blood quantum level.
Okay. Next question. What happens if you have a criminal record? Can you still qualify? I know that a criminal record, I mean, for a Canadian citizen, a criminal record is a very big deal for trying to get into the U.S. What say you when it comes to J Treaty?
As to the J Treaty, technically in the treaty, inadmissibility issues such as criminality or medical inadmissibility don't apply. Again, your mileage may vary.
I was waiting for a
but. But my favorite phrase, Sean.
Yeah.
It depends.
Yeah. Sure.
So if you murdered somebody, they're probably going to find a way to find you inadmissible, or you might have a problem with the paperwork or something, and it would be a stretch to get you in. If your criminal record is something minor, then it's probably not going to be an issue. Technically, under the law, you cannot be found to be admissible, and you can't be deported for criminality once you're in the U.S. But again, your mileage may vary.
Right. And none of this protects you at the border if you're, say, carrying marijuana or something like that. I mean, you still have to be very careful going through customs.
Exactly. Because if you're in the process of violating U.S. law at that moment, it could be bad.
Yeah. I mean, they can just place you under arrest. I mean, it's just you're going to go through the criminal justice system.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. Next question. I have lived in LA for 12 years as a J Treaty status, but I'm needing to get my green card. I like this one here. It says, should I hire counsel? I'm like, you're asking a lawyer if you should hire a lawyer. You're probably going to get, but anyway, go ahead, Michael. Take this one up.
So, yes. In general, the green card process is complex. I wouldn't tell anybody to do that on their own because there are lots of little pitfalls and lots of little details that somebody doing it on their own could miss. So you don't have to hire me, although I would love it. But I do suggest hiring counsel.
Right. Here's a tip for you. Hire Michael. He knows what he's talking about. Nobody else is doing JTV videos. Hire Michael.
Yeah, seriously, it's
right?
such a cool area of law,
Yeah.
and I literally get emails about it every week.
I know you do. And we get questions all the time online. Yeah, in the mailbox on Facebook or on YouTube. So we have a question here. So what if an adopted person has their papers from their real parents showing 50% and a status card? This sounds actually quite simple.
Yeah, because in the US, it always comes back to blood quantum. So if you can prove your genealogy, the adoption should not matter. Although it technically in an adoption, you are placed into the adoptive parents' bloodlines. If you can still show that you have 50% indigenous blood quantum, and you can show your connection to the band, your status card, your birth parents' genealogy, then yes, that should work.
Okay. Next question, the last one I have for you today, Michael. Does Métis Nation qualify under the Jay Treaty also? If it does, what documentation do I need?
Okay, so yes, it does, as long as you have the required blood quantum, because it always goes back to blood quantum in the Jay Treaty.
Right.
But so whether your band is enrolled with Indigenous Services Canada, or whether you're part of a nation that has more self-governing abilities, such as the Métis Nation. And just as an aside, there was, I think 3 or 4 days ago, Canada has renegotiated its relationship with the Métis Nations in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario, and giving them more self-governing powers. So that's only better in terms of what documentation the different Métis nations would be able to provide to their members for these purposes. But getting back to what I was saying, so if you're part, I get off on tangents. Sorry.
No, it's all right. I know.
But so if you're a member of, say, the Métis Nation or the Niska or the Swasan or the Inuit nations, then your enrollment paperwork or cards from those entities, along with genealogies, along with letters from the band or nation office, those are going to be integral to you being able to apply at the border, or if you're in the United States, apply at USCIS for recognition under the Jay Treaty.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very powerful tool.
It is.
If someone can take advantage of it, I think they should.
Exactly.
I mean, lining it up for a green card or something like that, being able to work across both borders, it's excellent.
Yeah. And I do want to add something that might have gotten lost in our chat about this. So if you would qualify under the Jay Treaty, you can, of course, go back and forth. You can work in the United States. You can apply for a Social Security number. The Social Security Administration should be able to process it, although they might need some nudging and to understand how they can go about it and where it's in their regulations. But you don't necessarily have to apply for U.S. permanent residence. You can, of course, but you don't have to. So a lot of people get caught up on that. It's like, oh, do I have to become a permanent resident?
Right.
The answer is actually no, you don't. Excellent.
Best advice you can get: opening up all the kettles of fishes with Michael O'Rourke. If you have any questions for him, be sure to reach him at the email you see on the screen, mo'rourke@pacelawfirm.com. Michael, thanks for doing this. We'll see you soon.
My pleasure, Sean. It's always fun to talk about this because it's just so cool.
Yeah, it's great stuff. We'll see you soon.
Take care, Sean. Bye-bye.